Our next video is about research, and research is important to help you win debates. While people that are talented speakers often win debates, it's really the people that are willing to dig into the topics and just figure out what's true in the arguments than people that are willing to do the research that oftentimes are the ones that win the most. Um, Research is really important because it can help with your confidence in debates. If you know the topic and you feel confident with the issues, you'll find that your speeches are just better. You'll know more of what to say and you'll be better prepared. It'll also improve your credibility as a speaker because you'll just have a command of the issues and you'll appear like you are very well prepared and put together, and that'll make judges want to vote for you. Oftentimes it can surprise your opponents if you're up to date on the arguments and you have some new evidence or new examples that they weren't prepared for. Sometimes that can put the debate in your favor. And then lastly, it's just that research is the foundation of argument. It's one of the most essential tools. Earlier we talked about persuasion. We know that logos, or the reasoning behind the argument, is one of the main ways that you can persuade people to believe what you want. Now, if we look at research that's available to you, if you think about it in terms of a hierarchy, probably the most important or the most qualified research is books. And that's just because a lot of time goes into books. They're usually very well fact-checked. They have a lot of good evidence. They have usually been the most rigorously tested version of an academic argument. So books are usually the strongest source that you can find. Following that is peer-reviewed academic journals. So academic journals are there's ones for every discipline that you can imagine. And peer-reviewed academic journals are usually a little bit harder to submit to and require, having other peers in your field sort of confirm your research. Very rigorous checks on sort of the things that they publish, the findings they publish. So the stuff that they do publish is usually very credible. The next level is academic journals, which, while they might have rigorous review, if they're not peer-reviewed, the findings might not be quite as legitimate as a peer-reviewed academic journal, just because they haven't had that second level of checks, but they're still very rigorous usually to publish in. Obviously journals are different, but you're usually in a good terrain to make an argument if you have a solid academic journal that supports what you're saying. The next one is news sources. I know there's a lot of complaining about the fake news these days. And while some news sources get it right and some get it wrong, for the most part, journalists are trying to, find all the information, make credible arguments. Their reputations are usually on the line. So news sources are often a great place to get research, particularly for things that are very current, because they can sort of respond to current events a lot faster than any of the previous three sorts of research that we talked about. Because books and academic journals generally take at least about a year to publish. Books oftentimes much, much longer. The next is think tanks. And so think tanks are kind of research organizations where people are paid to kind of look at problems and suggest solutions to them. Some can be very good. The problem with some is that they oftentimes can sort of have an agenda. So, they're sponsored by an organization and they produce research that also supports or helps that organization. So, for example, there might be a think tank that is sponsored by an agriculture industry, and then that think tank publishes evidence that supports things like subsidies for agriculture or trade deals that are favorable to that industry or whatever. And then the last one is qualified blogs. So there's lots of sources on the internet that are available. Some are more credible than others. Obviously you wouldn't use Wikipedia in an academic paper, but there are some things where it's a professor that's maybe talking about issues on the side, in a little less formal setting that can be very qualified for evidence. You kind of just want to ask yourself, could I use this in an academic paper for school? And if you feel like it would, be legitimate for that, then usually it's fine in a debate as well. The last thing I want to do is Kent Denver specific, but this is just to think about the library resources that you have available to you. So, in your learning management system, you want to go down to library and technology. Here you can search for any book that's at our library, and then you can also use all of our databases and research tools. So one of them is Academic Search Premier. This one's a really excellent database that just gives you access to a bunch of different tools for research. Connects to a bunch of different academic journals. You can limit your searches to things like only peer-reviewed content. We'll let that load up while we're looking at that. So this connects with EBSCO. So, for example, you can just look, let's say the topic that we're looking about is sort of like immigration reform. That's one of our topics in debate this year. You can limit it to just scholarly peer-reviewed sources. So, it went from 20,000 to 280 there. You can limit it to just a specific date or time. So, in the last 4 or 5 years. Okay, great. So now we know we've got 82 articles from peer-reviewed academic sources. Check those out and figured that out. So there's that. Other tools that we have, so they have access to a bunch of other journals, things like The Economist, New York Times. There's like one of these on here. Global Issues in Context usually has some sort of like current events, kind of back and forth issues. It's usually really helpful. You should figure out these resources and use them. The next one is the think tank search. And so here it's just like a Google search, but it searches through sort of all the think tanks that are available. So you can see it's about 700 of them. So that's access to a bunch of different research that's usually useful. I really like Google Scholar. I think the functionality of it is really good. So, you have immigration reform. You can customize the range. You can, change a bunch of other settings for this. I also really like that, like, let's say this book is a book that you've been using before, and you're like, okay, I like this, I want to find other things. The cited by function is really good because, like, people that are citing that book are usually, talking about the same issues. And then the last thing that I would like you all to just remember a little bit is just that there is problems with media bias, and so you kind of just want to ask yourself with every source that you look at, is this a liberal source? Is it a conservative source? How accurate is the information that it portrays? And it's not to say that every news source is bad, or that any news source on one of these more extreme websites can't have some credible information. But in general, like in a debate, you want to appear as credible as possible. So the more that you can present arguments that you can defend confidently, the better. And I think that's a good choice for debates, your academic career, etc. You want to make arguments that you can support by good sources that you would be proud of. So that's kind of the basics of research. I would say these are just kind of a guidepost to get you started. And remember that the better research that you do, the easier it is to win debates. And that's the goal of sort of all of this practice and preparation.